The Colonial Brotherhood Purge, as shown in Assassin's Creed Rogue, was a brutal and devastating campaign against the assassins in the American colonies. Some even say it was necessary and well-deserved. However, what if I told you that the Colonial Assassin Purge was a lot worse than what we see in Assassin's Creed Rogue? In reality, the Colonial Brotherhood Purge was far more horrific and extensive than what we witness in the game. For this video, we'll explore why was this purge so successful, and more importantly, what we didn't see in the game, and trust me, there's a lot. As a preview, some of the topics we'll be going over are the ruthless Templar attacks and strategies that were far too extreme for the games, assassin hunters so ruthless that they made Shay look friendly, and Templar massacres that claimed countless lives. We'll also uncover stories of lesser known members of the Colonial Assassins and Templars, many of whom met brutal and tragic ends. So with that being said, let's get right into it. To begin, let's go over why this purge was so successful. Let's begin with the Templars, the people responsible for the purge. Throughout history, the Templar Order has taken many forms, but very few have been as effective at dismantling the assassins or hidden ones as the Colonial Templars. And why exactly is that? To properly answer this, we have to trace it back to the origin of the Colonial Templar Rite. Let's begin with the founding of the Colonial Templars and where exactly they come from. The Colonial Templars are not just a random delusional group of people who are power hungry like the other Templars from different orders. They primarily come from the British Rite, which makes them extremely dangerous. Let's keep in mind that the British Templar Order at this time was the strongest the Templars had ever been, and the Colonial Templars were just another branch of the same order. Reginald Birch, one of the greatest Templar Grandmasters in history, sent Haytham Kenway and other skilled individuals over to the colonies to create this new Templar Order. Both Birch and Haytham were already experienced with dealing with the assassins. After the death of Edward Kenway, Birch all but wiped out the London Brotherhood and raised Haytham to follow in his footsteps. By the time Haytham arrived to the colonies, he was already a veteran at fighting and defeating assassins. Even Miko, mentor of the British Brotherhood, warned Achilles about the threat of the British Rite. Not only that, a majority of the Colonial Templars were battle experienced in some way. A lot of them were part of the army, educated and skilled, making them tough opponents for the assassins. They also had multiple assassin hunters in their ranks. Yes, multiple. And some of them were downright terrifying. We'll cover them later in the video. On top of this, they had help from Shay Cormac, a former assassin turned Templar. Shay knew all their tactics, their training, and their weaknesses. With his skills, Haytham's experience, elite Templar agents, and the resources of the British Empire behind them, the Templars had everything they needed to defeat the Colonial Brotherhood. But it wasn't just the Templar strength that made the purge so effective. It was also the assassins' own mistakes. They were pretty much breaking all three of their tenets, beginning with the first one, stay your blade from the flesh of the innocent. The assassins cause a lot of destruction, especially when they're searching for precursor artifacts. The search causes multiple cities to be destroyed. Their gangs also cause a lot of trouble for the civilian population. Each gang hideout only had one assassin running it, so it was hard for the assassins to keep their gangs in check. Next up, we have hide in plain sight. The gang hideouts literally have assassin flags flying around. Not only that, their allies are very recognizable and they send multiple gang members to kill simple targets. Seriously, the assassin interception missions have like 8 gang members try to kill 1 civilian. It's crazy. It's even funnier if you realize that the gangs are known to be affiliated with the assassins. Finally, we have never compromised the Brotherhood. If you break the previous tenets, you're going to indirectly break this final one. If you're not hiding in plain sight, you're going to tell your enemies exactly where you are, hence you're going to compromise the Brotherhood. If you kill innocents, you're going to get your enemies and your allies to dislike you. It could also cause unforeseen problems like with Shay Cormac. The assassins not following their creed and heavily relying on random gang members made them easy targets for the Templars. The Templars knew exactly where they were, how to deal with them, and had the resources to do so. Also, since most of the assassin forces were random thugs, the Templars likely didn't even need overly skilled fighters to deal with them. They could just use regular soldiers to deal with the gang, since professionally trained soldiers were obviously a lot more dangerous than random thugs. So in summary, why were the Templars so effective at exterminating the Colonial Brotherhood? Number 1, experience. The British Templars were already experienced with fighting assassins. Haytham Kenway, for example, had taken part of the British Brotherhood Purge. Number 2, Shay Cormac. Shay was an ex-assassin with insider knowledge who personally dismantled much of the Brotherhood. Number 3. Skilled members. Most of the Templars were trained, educated, and combat ready. Unlike other Templars throughout the franchise, they could hold their own. Number 4. Assassin incompetence. Their disregard for the Creed made them easy targets. And finally, number 5. Resources. The Templars were backed by the British Empire. They had far more funding, support, and infrastructure. The Assassins couldn't really compete with that. Now let's head into part 2 of this video and go over what we saw in Assassin's Creed Rogue and what we didn't. In Assassin's Creed Rogue, we play as Shay Cormac, an ex-assassin who becomes a Templar and an assassin hunter. Through his eyes, we're able to see part of the Colonial Brotherhood's purge. As Shay, we hunt down high-ranking members of the Colonial Brotherhood, liberate New York, the River Valley, and the North Atlantic from the Brotherhood. We stop multiple assassinations and destroy the gang that the Brotherhood relied on. Shay also fought the Brotherhood's navy. The damage he did to their fleet was substantial. Shay was also involved with the British war effort, but will only be focusing on the Assassin Purge in this video. Now, this is an impressive list, but let's quickly analyze it to see if it was really as impressive as it sounds. The Colonial Brotherhood is the assassin brotherhood that spans across America, particularly the 13 colonies. They had connections to other parts of America, such as the Louisiana Brotherhood, but they were primarily in the 13 colonies, which for my non-American viewers were the original 13 states of the United States of America. Now, what's really surprising is that in Assassin's Creed Rogue, Shay only directly targets the assassins in New York, one colony out of 13, while he also operates in parts of Canada shown in the North Atlantic part of the map and briefly in Virginia. There's actually only one location in the game that appears to be in Virginia, and that's Mount Vernon. Most of his campaign focuses on the state of New York. Even the River Valley is only composed of New York locations, as confirmed by in-game data and historical research. If you Google all the locations of the River Valley, all of them will be in New York, except Mount Vernon, which we already went over. The River Valley is also not really accurate with the real world and is probably just a rough representation of the area outside of New York, judging by the locations featured in it. It's similar to what we see in Assassin's Creed 3 with the Frontier. The Frontier in AC3 is supposed to represent multiple states, but it's clearly not made to scale. The River Valley is likely similar to that. What's funny is that Shay is oftentimes considered to be the person who destroyed the Brotherhood, and what he did was notable, but from what we see in Assassin's Creed Rogue, he only took them out in one of the 13 colonies. Obviously, not every single state is going to be a hotspot for the assassins. The assassin presence in the colonies would likely vary depending on how important each state was during the 7 Years' War. States like New York and Massachusetts would likely have the strongest assassin presence. We see New York is filled with assassins in Rogue, and Massachusetts is the state where the Davenport Manor is located. Pennsylvania, Virginia, and Maryland were probably somewhat important to the assassins due to the Native American population, which we know were allied with the assassins. The land and sea routes in these states were also important during the war. The remaining states likely had assassin presence, but it was probably a lot less and it would vary depending on the state. And here's another kicker: the game's main story ends in 1760, which is 3 years before the Colonial Brotherhood Purge officially ends. This means that the conclusion and a large part of the Purge happened off-screen. So if Shay Cormac didn't wipe out the assassins in these colonies, who did? Well, this is where we introduce the other assassin hunters. We already know some of them thanks to Assassin's Creed Rogue. Christopher Gist was Shay's quartermaster and right-hand man. After Shay left to search for the precursor box, Gist was put in charge of destroying the remaining assassins. Hatham was heavily involved too. After all, he was the literal Grand Master of the Colonial Templars while this was going on. There were a couple others in Rogue, but I'm primarily talking about serious assassin hunters, Shay Cormac style. For this, we're actually going to have to look at Assassin's Creed 3's multiplayer, which shows us quite a few of these assassin hunters, and we'll quickly go over them. If you don't know, the old Assassin's Creed multiplayer had you, the player, playing as real-life characters in a simulation where you were trying to assassinate other players. There were multiple game modes with varying levels of difficulty, just like other multiplayer games. In actual Assassin's Creed lore, this was used to either train Templars in combat or more akin to a video game for the general public. The characters you play as are real characters, but they were put in a simulation that allows the Abstergo user or player to control or play them, kind of like Desmond with the Animus training programs. Each character has a different level of skill and background, and we'll be looking at some of them. By the way, for each character's name, I'll either be using their actual names or their multiplayer names. I just don't want to mispronounce some of them and look like a complete clown. I will put their real name or multiplayer name on screen if I can't properly pronounce one of them. So the first person we'll be looking at is a man named Coyote Man, and yes, that's his actual name. He was a Colonial Templar who was actually considered to be the deadliest assassin hunter in North America during the 18th century. Obviously he was created before Rogue came out, but it's still very impressive. The Coyote Man was said to have killed an assassin mentor with his bare hands. It's said that he was a psychopath who liked spilling blood, a lot different than Shay. He was very strong, fast, and agile, making him a deadly opponent for the assassins. Next up we have the Preacher, who his real name was Federico Perez, and he was a preacher, who would have guessed. He had an obsession with killing assassins who he considered to be sinners. He had a blind faith in the Templar order. The Templars admired him because of his compulsive behavior and the fact that they had complete control over him. Moving on, we have the Commander and the Redcoat. They were father and daughter, both experienced in the military and both greatly skilled. They carried out missions against the assassins during the Revolutionary War. However, I'm bringing them up because it's clear that the Templars would have people in the British Army that would be very similar to this duo. Since both of them were part of the British Army, it gave the Templars an even easier access to the Army's resources. Speaking of that, we have a very skilled German mercenary who was known as the Hessian in the modern day. He blindly followed orders and was a psychopath just like the Coyote Man. Since the Templars had so many blind followers, it would make hunting down assassins an easy task. The last Templar we'll cover is a man named Victor Walcott. He was a doctor who performed very infamous experiments. His medicine was said to keep his Templar brothers alive even if they were on the brink of death. He also dissected fresh bodies, which we don't really know how he got them. So in total, the Templars had multiple assassin hunters, blind followers who were very skilled, and allies that could give them a huge advantage over their enemies. And we only get to see a couple of them, so the Colonial Right likely had a lot more members similar to these guys. I also want to talk about the Colonial Assassins or Assassin Allies, and no, not the ones we saw in Rogue. The assassins we see in Rogue are likely just a fraction of the entire Colonial Brotherhood. It's absurd to assume that the entire organization operated exactly like Achilles' Inner Circle. As we said before, we only really hunted down the assassins in New York and parts of Canada in Assassin's Creed Rogue. There are probably tons of highly skilled assassins we never saw, and probably some morally good ones rather than poorly written villains. Even in broken brotherhoods, there are always good assassins somewhere. Shay only kills a total of 4 main Colonial assassins. Adewale doesn't count since he's a member of the West Indies Brotherhood and only helps out the Colonial assassins if needed. I'm not even sure about the first guy you kill, I forget his name, I don't even know if he's an assassin. He just seems to be a fort commander with some connections to the assassins. Anyways, I don't know about you, but only killing 4 main assassins, granted Shay killed a lot of unnamed assassins, doesn't seem like it's enough. Surely there were other well-known or important assassins out there. After all, we only see one memory in the homestead that introduces you to your targets. Obviously the assassins would be spread out since there was a literal war going on, and not everyone is going to chill at the homestead at the exact same time. So let's now look at some of the enemies of the Templars, both assassins and non-assassins, in AC3's multiplayer. AC3's multiplayer and the main sources don't clarify when exactly some of these guys operated. However, we can assume it was around the Colonial Brotherhood's purge. First up, we have the Night Stalker, or Joe. He was a member of the assassins who was believed to be a psychologically unstable mercenary who murdered civilians in the streets of New York. Now, everything I just said was wrong. In reality, he truly cared about justice and hunted down those who abused women. The funny thing is, he got his name Joe because one of the Templars he was hunting down screamed that name before the Night Stalker killed him. Following that, we have Emily Burke. She was an assassin ally who helped them during the Revolutionary War. However, the reason she helped them was because when she grew up, her father and brother were both killed by Templars. Maybe during the Purge, who knows. Caleb Garrett was a sharpshooter who joined the Assassins after seeing his friends being burned alive by the Templars. We never see the Templars do anything this brutal in Rogue, and honestly, can you blame Caleb for joining the Assassins after witnessing that? Duncan McGill was a man who was loyal to the Assassins and hated the British and fought against them, foiling Templar goals. As a result of this, McGill became a subject of folktales under the nickname Red Rage Duncan. Next up, we have Fillion McCarthy. He was a thief who grew up on the streets. Because of that, he knew how to survive, was agile, and experienced. He eventually ran into the Assassins and joined them. Unfortunately, his sister ran into the Templars and joined them, so it's kind of a neat dynamic they have. Fillion was very loyal to the Assassins and helped them out. Following that, we have the Silent Shadow, who is similar to Connor Kenway. Both Connor and him are Native American and have similar traumas. The Silent Shadow was living a quiet and peaceful life before his assassin father was killed by a Templar raiding party. After this, he hunted down the Templars and looked for revenge. Moving on, we have the Independent, who battled against the Templars because of their influence. She was considered a violent radical to the Templars, but a heroic champion of justice to her people, and that's because she was defending their culture from Templar influence. In the future, the Templars would fabricate her story to make her appear as a villain, which was not actually the case. And finally, we have John O'Brien. He isn't an assassin, but he was an Irish worker who moved to America because of Templar persecution. After years of suffering, he became violent. He might even be related to Liam O'Brien from Rogue because of their last name, who knows. So, as we can see, Assassin's Creed Rogue doesn't properly portray the entire Colonial Brotherhood Purge. The game only shows the Purge in New York and Canada, forgetting about the other 12 colonies. Shay was also only focusing on taking down the assassins who were looking for the precursor artifacts. In reality, there were many assassins who were not involved with the search for the Isu sites. A lot of them were fighting for justice and protecting people. Rogue portrays the Colonial Assassins as really bad people, when in reality that wasn't completely true. Sure, some of them were misguided or corrupt, but there were many honorable assassins trying to do good. Even in Rogue itself, it's clear that the assassins weren't entirely purely evil. Their search for the pieces of Eden caused a lot of destruction, and their gangs did terrorize cities, but they also tried to help. They sent aid to earthquake victims, opposed the British when they targeted civilians, and took in orphans and outcasts, staying true to the Creed in some ways. When you look beyond Rogue, the Colonial Assassins were far more nuanced. A large part of the Brotherhood seemed to actually be decent. At the same time, the Templars weren't exactly noble heroes either. They were brutal. Very, very brutal. By the time of Assassin's Creed 3, the Colonial Brotherhood had pretty much vanished. Only Achilles, Connor, and a few other survivors remained. Rogue portrays the Purge as necessary, but it oversimplifies things. Every assassin is treated like a threat, while the Templars come off as righteous. But we know they used horrific methods, such as burning people alive, executing peaceful assassins living in exile, and even wiping out entire families. We're never told if these victims were truly guilty or just enemies of the Order. If Rogue had shown us how vicious this event truly was, players might have questioned whether Shay and the Templars were actually in the right. And if we look at the British Templars, their purge of the London Brotherhood was just as thorough. By the time of Assassin's Creed Syndicate and its tie-in novel Assassin's Creed Underworld, only Ethan Frye and George Westhouse were still active. If the Colonial Purge was anywhere near that level of destruction, it makes sense that by AC3, Connor was the only assassin really left standing. This wouldn't have happened without dedicated assassin hunters. Shay wasn't the only one, we know that, and it's a shame the game didn't show us more of them. It would have added so much more complexity. Instead, Rogue takes the easy route and paints nearly every assassin as flawed. But we know that from lore, there were a lot of Colonial assassins that were good people. Rogue could have been so much more impactful if it made us question our entire mission and objective. Since it's the only game where we play as a true Templar, it deserved a better script. There's almost no exploration of the control versus free will theme. The assassins are cartoonishly villainized and the Templars are hailed as saviors when that's far from the truth. Now, one last thing I want to touch on happens after Shay leaves to find the precursor box. The Purge continued for years after his departure. The mentor Achilles, despite being crippled by Hatham, kept fighting. He trained new assassins and tried to rebuild the broken Brotherhood. But in 1763, the Templars launched one final devastating attack on the Brotherhood. They raided the Davenport homestead, the Colonial Brotherhood's last stronghold, and massacred nearly everyone. Only Achilles and Robert Faulkner were spared, fired, the latter going on to become Connor's quartermaster. The assault left the homestead in ruins, and by the time we see it in AC3, it's empty and lifeless. Following this attack, Achilles practically gave up. He had lost his entire brotherhood, his homestead, his friends, his wife, his son, and his purpose. He would remain this way until Connor came around. The late purge was merciless. Pierre Belec, Arno's mentor, was training in the colonies at the time and mentioned that the Templars would wipe out entire villages just to have a chance at killing one assassin. The Davenport Homestead Massacre is likely even worse than we think. Keep in mind that assassin recruits that usually train at the main hideouts are young and immature. When we see assassins in training, a lot of them haven't really experienced the world and are simply looking to make a difference and help people. This Templar assault likely meant that the assassins who just started training, very young ones, were ruthlessly killed. I don't think Shay would have approved of this, but then again the assassins were still operating despite what Hatham had told Achilles years earlier. So were the Templars justified? Let me know in the comments. Anyways, that's everything I wanted to go over in this video. The Purge was far more brutal than Rogue lets on. Neither the assassins nor the Templars were noble. Both sides were doing questionable things, so it's hard to say which side was 100% the evil side. If AC Rogue ever gets a remake, or if Ubisoft revisits this era in a future game, I would love to see these events explored more deeply. Moments like the Davenport Massacre were never shown, but they would carry so much emotional weight if we got to see them. Other assassin hunters would be nice too. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, or if I missed or glossed over something, feel free to drop a comment to share your thoughts. And as always, have a great rest of your day.